the right, knock him out, knock him out, knock him out for the night. One time, knock him out. Two times, knock him out, knock him out, knock him out for the night.
So I've come to a realization recently. I am not as smart as my kids. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. It's not that it's about knowledge with my kids, it's more about creativity and problem solving. So as a man who considers myself a strong problem solver, it irritates me to no end that my 8 and 10-year-olds are smarter than me. And that when I give them a problem, they can solve that problem better and faster than I can. So the question is, why are they so much smarter than me when it comes to problem solving? I've thought a lot about this, and I realized that the creativity of a child is really what we need to focus on here. And it's really the creativity of a child versus the creativity of an adult. And I have a theory that as adults, we went and did the worst thing possible when it comes to creativity. We grew up, right? And even though I consider myself an outside-the-box creative, compared to a kid, it's really no contest for me. And I've seen this in action. So when I was writing this, I considered going the route of doing some research, looking at some case studies on this subject, but then I kind of realized that I'm doing what adults always do, and I was overthinking it. So I simplified a little. I did the next best thing, and I decided that I was going to do a case study of my own and just interview my 2 kids about this. And I was going to involve a problem that I was having, and that was to write this TED Talk. So I began researching. I did what I needed to do. I began thinking about an idea, and I did the first thing that an adult would normally do when they're doing a new project. I Googled it, right? I Googled how to write a TED Talk. And the funny part about that is that this is actually my second TEDx talk. So how uncreative is that I Googled how to write a TED Talk when I've done this before? And I public speak all year long. So I'm super uncreative when it comes to this. Now, I didn't have to reach too far outside the box when I did my first TEDx because it was a subject that was directly related to the last few years of my life. But this particular subject, I don't know what I'm doing wrong when it comes to my creativity. So I started to write. I did my research, I talked to colleagues, and I looked for input and guidance. And I sat down to actually write this thing, or at least I thought I was going to write it. And nothing was coming out. I suffered the worst writer's block that I had had in years on this. So I decided to now sit down with my kids and interview them separately, first about writing a TED Talk. And I asked them both what they would do if they were to write a TED Talk. But the first question was, do you know what a TED Talk is? And they both kind of answered the same. You know, they said this is a talk where you come up with a creative idea that only you know about. So, good start. I said, how would you write it? And they said, come up with an idea, do research, write the talk, practice it over and over again, and then go and do it. So I said, what if you had a problem writing that talk? And my son said to me, why would you have a problem if it's your idea? And I said, what if it's my idea, but I don't know what to write about it? And he said, Dad, if you don't know what to write, maybe it's not a good idea to talk about it. And I said, no. What if it's an idea that I know a lot about, but I just don't know how to put it into words? And he said, Dad, you're overthinking it. I said, Johnny, you got to understand, I'm going up on the stage and I have high expectations for myself, and people are expecting something profound to come out of my mouth. And he said, Dad, that doesn't sound very creative the way you're thinking right now. And he was right. And what blows my mind is that this is the same kid that 3 times in his life that I can remember put 2 pairs of underwear on at the same time because he forgot the first pair was there. And now he's taking me to school with writing a TED Talk. So what this comes down to for me is that we sort of have a box that we put around ourselves, right? And it's funny that the theme of this TED Talk is what box? Because that's really a great question, is that there really is no box, right? The box is this imaginary thing that we put around ourselves and put these boundaries and limitations on us. And this kind of came because we developed, over the course of our adult lives, we developed this sort of persona of being jaded and learning things that we think are going to limit us, and it winds up putting us into a box. When you think about all the things that you've gone through in your life in terms of, emotions and heartbreak and anguish. Now, how does that affect how you think when it comes to making a decision? It slows down your decision making. It changes the way you think. It changes your creativity, right? And we'll even go so far as to sometimes say that we don't have time for a creative thought, right? I'll give you a good example of this. My wife, who's in the crowd now, she's a dynamo when it comes to directions, right? She drives somewhere once, that's it. It's in her memory, she memorizes it, she knows how to get there. It could be 3 hours away, 6 hours away, she'll know how to get there. When we drive in the car and I'm driving, if it's more than 15 minutes away, I'm putting it in the GPS. And I don't care if I've been there a dozen times, I am putting it in the GPS. So one day we were driving out east to her parents' summer house, and she said to me, "Why are you putting this in GPS? We've been here 100 times. And I said, because if I have to remember another thing, I'm gonna go crazy. So GPSs were invented so that I could not use that part of my brain today. I'm gonna go on autopilot, and I'm just not gonna think about it because it physically hurts sometimes to have to think about yet another thing, right? And that's an excuse that we always have as adults, right? We think that we shouldn't be creative. We think that creativity is not something that we have time for. I asked my daughter what the meaning of creativity is. And she said that creativity is when you do things in a unique way. I asked her who she thinks is more creative, kids or adults. And she said to me that adults have more common sense, so kids are more creative, okay? So I found that intriguing. I said to her, what does common sense have to do with creativity? And she said that common sense makes you think regular and it's boring. She said that if you ask an adult and a kid to draw a dog, the adult will draw the dog and they're gonna do a really good job and it's gonna be detailed and it's gonna look just like a dog. But the kid might put a unicorn horn on it, might put wings on it, make it rainbow colored. And she said something that really struck me. She said that an adult will just make another dog, but the kid might invent a unidog or a dogacorn. She's obsessed with unicorns. Now, I know I'm biased, but doesn't that sound like the thought process of an innovator to you? Right? That's how an innovator should think in terms of creativity. So here's the meat and potatoes of what we're talking about here. We've basically discovered that when you're a child, you have little to no limitations on your ideas. If your idea is right, then great. If your idea is wrong, who cares? We're wrong. We're wrong, we start over, right? But as an adult, we have those limitations because we know about consequences. We've developed reasoning, and our brain says that everything must have a reason and bad things must have a consequence. And we start becoming afraid to go near the boundaries of our ideas. But that can't be right in terms of just being an adult. I mean, there are plenty of creative adults out there, so there's got to be some kind of secret to maintain creativity as an adult. But it's super hard for us. Now, I can only speak in terms of myself when it comes to creativity, but as an adult, my creativity has always come in the form of a spark of an emotion or inspiration that causes me to think deeply enough to focus on only that idea. And sometimes that idea comes naturally, and sometimes it's a little more difficult to get into that zone. So I have to create a creative mood, so to speak. So for me, while watching inspirational videos locked in a room on YouTube, that's my creative zone, right? That's how I kind of get into that zone. Now, the question that I aim to answer today, now that we have an idea of why growing up has hindered our creativity, is twofold. For the adult, it's how do we get back to some form of that child that we lost years ago in terms of our creativity? And for a kid, the question is, how do we cultivate the creativity of a child and not allow time to ruin the uniqueness of their ideas that's so special? And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I think we can do both the same way. I think that adults are an important part of the process on both sides because as parents, family, or educators, we should create an environment of communication with the child so that they understand how their creativity works. But on the same token, as adults, we need to be introspective and communicate our own thoughts, even if it's on paper, so that we understand our own process. And once we understand that process, we need to find our spark. Have you ever had that moment when something clicked in your brain and you came up with the best idea ever and you just had to go do it or build it or share it with somebody? That's your spark. You need to find your spark and look back through the years at past sparks that you've had and think about the environment that you were in when you had those sparks. That's your zone. And you need to protect that zone and make sure that the kids' zones are protected, because we need to make sure their entire life is a zone, right? We need to foster a creative environment that they understand that creativity should be a part of their everyday lives. So balance is something that's super important in creativity. I can't get in a zone if I'm worried about things, right? In order to be a creative, if that's what you want, you need to find that space and balance your life so that you have the ability to sit down when you need to be creative and just think with no limitations, right? You need to keep learning, right? Now, it's no coincidence to me that kids are forced to go to school 10 months a year until they're 18 every single year. They are literally learning every single day. So it's no coincidence that they are so much more creative than us. As adults, we tend to copy the attitude that we've seen and done it all. No, we haven't. We can learn every day. Learn something new every day in order to spark ideas every day. Unplug. Now, this is super important. This one is for everyone. There is nothing that messes up your balancing your creativity like the countless gigabytes of information that you ingest every single minute that you are on technology. And don't get me wrong, I'm a techie, I love my toys, but the first 5 times that I sat down to write this talk in front of my TV with my laptop on and my iPad and my iPhone in my hand, I got nothing done. There was nothing creative that came out of this. So we need to unplug. And in fact, I'm trying to implement this in my house. We have a new thing on Friday nights where as soon as the pizza is served, all the phones, all the iPads, they go in a shoebox for the rest of the night. So I'm so excited to see what ideas and conversations come from the next year's worth of Friday nights. And lastly, be creative until you're not. And this is important. Be creative hard. Do not think about limitations when you are trying to be creative. But when you don't feel that spark anymore, when that spark is dim, just walk away. If your kid has that spark get dim and they're not feeling it, let them walk away. Let them move on. Because creativity that we force really becomes work, okay? We need to embrace the idea that we need to create a safe zone for a child as they grow so that they never have the creative struggles that we had. We need to embrace the idea that creativity is only hindered by a non-existent box, and it's up to you to decide how creative you are. And that's an idea worth spreading. Thank you.
With the left, with the right, knock him out, knock him out, knock him out for the night. 1 time, knock him out. 2 times, knock him out, knock him out, knock him out.